After 30 years of marriage, I never imagined hearing such words from my wife. We had built a life together, raised children, and faced all the challenges that come with growing older. Yet one evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, she said something that shattered my world. "He's younger than you and better in bed," she blurted out, her voice trembling with a mix of guilt and defiance. I was stunned. I had never seen this coming. Our marriage had been steady, maybe even predictable. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but nothing like this. My heart sank as I tried to process what she had just said. Was she really telling me she had been with someone else? I struggled to stay calm and asked her in a shaky voice, "What do you mean? Who is he?" She looked down, avoiding my eyes. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "His name is Jason. He's a co-worker. We've been involved for a few months now." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I could barely breathe, let alone respond. Jason, a younger man, someone who had stirred desires in her that I hadn't touched in years. I wasn't blind. I knew our intimacy had faded, but this was something I could never have prepared for. I had spent countless nights wondering if there was more I could do to reignite the spark between us. I had tried, truly, but life had a way of wearing us down. The kids, the bills, the routine. And now, the painful truth sat before me. My wife, the woman I had loved and cherished for decades, had found something I could no longer give her in the arms of another man. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Then she finally looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I needed something more." He made me feel alive again. Anger flared in me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a deep, aching sadness. How had we ended up here? How had we lost each other so completely that she felt the need to seek comfort in someone else's arms? I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. I had always seen myself as a loyal and loving husband. But now, I had to confront the possibility that I had failed her in some way, just as she had failed me. "We need to talk about this," I finally said, my voice low but steady. "I don't know what this means for us, but we need to figure it out." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "I don't know where we go from here either," she admitted, "but I'm willing to try." I never meant for it to go this far. Her words hung in the air, a painful reminder of how fragile relationships can be. Could we rebuild what we had lost? Or was this the beginning of the end of everything we had built together? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that the man I once was now stood amidst the ruins of a marriage I never thought would break. The days that followed were a blur. My mind was constantly racing, trying to understand how we had reached this point. I replayed every moment of our marriage in my head, every conversation, every quiet gesture, searching for the cracks that had grown into this chasm. The house felt colder, emptier, even though she was still there. She tried to act normal, going about our routines as if nothing had changed. But the tension between us was thick, an invisible wall that neither of us could break through. Every time I looked at her, I didn't just see the woman I had spent 30 years with. I also saw the woman who had betrayed me. A few days later, I decided to confront her again. The devastating conversation from that night lingered between us, unresolved. Sitting across from her in our living room, I knew we couldn't avoid it any longer. I searched for the right words. My voice felt strange, almost foreign, as if I were speaking to a stranger. "Do you love him?" I asked, the question hanging in the air like a fragile thread. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted nervously before she let out a shaky breath. "I don't know," she said finally. "I don't want to hurt you, but I think I've been lost for a long time. Jason gave me attention, something I didn't even realize I was craving. It wasn't just about sex. It was about feeling seen again. My heart clenched. Feeling seen? I couldn't help but wonder how long she had felt invisible to me. Had I been so consumed by life, responsibilities, and the years slipping by that I had failed to notice her fading into the background? I had always believed our love was steady, something that would only grow stronger with time. But maybe I had taken it for granted. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my voice cracking. "But I don't know how to move past this. I can't just forget what you've done." Her tear-filled eyes searched mine, as though she were waiting for some sign of hope. I don't want to lose you either," she whispered. "I made a mistake, and I'm sorry. I don't know if we can fix this, but I want to try." The word try echoed in my mind. It was a small, fragile hope, but it was all we had left. Trying wasn't easy. It meant facing the pain, the betrayal, and the deep-rooted insecurities that had surfaced in the wake of her affair. It meant questioning everything I thought I knew about our marriage. I needed answers. Why him? Why now? What did he give you that I couldn't? I asked, desperate to understand the depth of her unhappiness. She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor. "It's not about him," she said quietly. "It's about me, how I felt invisible. It's not fair to you, but I become someone I didn't recognize. When he came along, he made me feel alive again. He made me feel desirable. But I never meant for it to go this far." The more she spoke, the more I began to understand the depth of her inner struggles. She wasn't blaming me, but I couldn't deny the role I had played. I hadn't seen it before, but now I was forced to confront it. "I've been trying to understand," I said softly. "I really have, but I don't know how to move forward. Can we really come back from this? Can we rebuild what's been broken?" She shook her head slowly, her uncertainty mirroring my own. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I want to try. I don't want to throw away everything we've built." We sat in silence, both grappling with the weight of what had happened and the uncertain path ahead. The future felt fragile, like something we needed to handle with the utmost care. The idea of rebuilding, of finding our way back to each other, felt daunting. But somehow, we both knew it was the only way forward. It wasn't going to be easy. There were no guarantees. The trust that had been shattered couldn't be repaired overnight. But in that moment, despite everything, I felt a faint flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal. Not because things would go back to the way they were, but because we were willing to confront the pain together, to face the cracks that had formed in our relationship. This wasn't the end of our story, but it was a turning point. With time, patience, and a willingness to forgive, perhaps we could redefine what we had. Something different, perhaps, but no less meaningful. As days turned into weeks, the weight of that conversation lingered in the background of our lives. We didn't talk about the affair every day, but it was always there, a quiet presence. Every glance and every touch carried the heaviness of what had happened. I couldn't help but wonder if things could ever truly return to the way they once were. We decided to start therapy. At first, the sessions were awkward and strained. The conversations felt unnatural, as though we were strangers fumbling through emotions we barely understood. There were moments when the intimacy we once shared felt buried beneath layers of hurt and doubt. But slowly, something began to shift. I started to see her, truly see her, in a way I hadn't in years. Therapy forced us to confront the underlying issues in our marriage. The small things we had neglected over time and the quiet resentments we had allowed to fester without acknowledgement. My wife admitted she had felt increasingly disconnected, not just physically but emotionally. It wasn't just the affair that had driven her to seek someone else. It was a deep loneliness she had carried silently for so long. She had felt invisible, and I couldn't deny it. I had spent so much of my time and energy focusing on work, on making sure everything was in place for our family, that I had failed to notice the subtle shifts in our connection. Our routines had become so predictable, so comfortable, that I didn't even realize she was slipping away from me. In truth, we had both neglected our needs, emotionally and physically. The comfort of routine had masked the growing distance between us. The hardest part for me was forgiveness. I knew I had to let go of the anger and betrayal if we were ever going to move forward. But saying it was one thing, doing it was another. There were nights when I lay awake, my mind replaying images of her with him. The thought of her touching someone else consumed me with jealousy and pain. Yet, with each day, I tried to remind myself that holding on to the pain would only push us further apart. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to live with the hurt, understanding it, and eventually releasing it. I started to notice small changes in her. She became more present, more open with her feelings. She would reach for my hand during dinner or rest her head on my shoulder as we watched TV. Things we hadn't done in years. It wasn't the same as before, but it was a start. The spark wasn't reigniting in the way I hoped, but there was a flicker of something we hadn't felt in a long time. A connection, an effort to rebuild. There were still moments of doubt. The question of whether we could ever truly heal lingered in the back of my mind, sometimes louder than I wanted to admit. But as the weeks turned into months, I realized that healing wasn't a straight path. There were setbacks, moments when the pain resurfaced, but there were also moments of progress. We began to talk again, really talk, not just about the daily grind, but about things that truly mattered. Our hopes, our fears, the parts of ourselves we had hidden from each other for so long. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but the effort was there from both of us. Somewhere along the way, we began to trust each other again, not in a way that erased the past, but in a way that allowed us to move forward despite it. The scars would always remain, but they didn't have to define us. One night, several months after the affair came to light, we sat on the couch watching the sunset through the living room window. My wife turned to me and spoke softly. "I know this has been hard, but thank you for being willing to try. I'm not asking for things to go back to the way they were. I just want us to be okay again." I smiled, the weight in my chest easing slightly. "I don't know if we'll ever be the way we were," I admitted, "but I think we can find something new, something better, maybe." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I hope so," she whispered, placing her hand on mine. In that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't about going back to what we once had. It was about moving forward, together, with the lessons we had learned. We weren't perfect, and we would never be the same, but we were still standing side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something even stronger than before. And in that fragile hope, we found a new beginning, not in spite of the pain, but because of it.